everyone, welcome back to Alkaline Hydroxide 784, and today in the GP overview series we'll be looking at sociolinguistics. Okay, this is a topic that's dear to me. Okay, maybe that's pushing it too far. And you might be wondering why I'm doing this. Well, it doesn't seem like a topic that would be remotely tested in GP, and I don't remember seeing any questions on language to begin with. But then again, I don't remember most of the questions I've seen, so yeah, I don't even remember which question I did for A-levels. But who knows, it could be tested in the future, or you could use the info for other society-based questions or some other question, who knows. Or maybe if you're interested in taking linguistics in the future or something, this could be useful to have an idea of what exactly it is. This seems very ironical since I'm doing a major that's eons away from linguistics, but you get the point. Either way, let's start. So the first thing we'll do is the definition as usual. And basically, I'm going to make a distinction between linguistics and sociolinguistics. So linguistics is like the big broad topic that includes the stuff that you usually think about, which is structural linguistics. You know, the stuff about the grammar, the sentence structure like SOE or SVO, maybe, I don't know, language history, stuff like that. Okay, cool. But there's another branch of linguistics which is called sociolinguistics, where I'm looking more of the various aspects of society on the evolution of a language in that particular society, for example. So these things would probably include things like slang, like youth speak, because, the young always have something new that they can say. Borrowings from either colonial history or from media influences, if you're looking at today, like for example K-pop or more traditionally American media. Choice of language, like people choosing which language to speak per se, and just influenced by a bunch of things. Or even you can look at diglossia, which means you speak two different languages in the same conversation, and so on. So yeah, let's look at some of these, and we'll look at some of these aspects or things that we can look at in a bunch of different issues and see what we can get out of that. Okay, for the thing is, I never really took any links for most of this, so whatever links that I put in the website will be just more like stuff that maybe might help you explain the stuff, or just actual examples, like to get more details on the examples maybe. Or maybe it could be completely different examples, so that's the disclaimer. Okay, so the first issue is about language shift, the good, bad, and ugly. Okay, so what this is referring to is basically shifting from speaking one language primarily to speaking another language primarily. So if we look at, it's raining. Okay, never mind. If we look at Singapore, there's been a shift towards English since the 1980s, I think, because one, the government promoted English, especially via education. As you can see, all our subjects are pretty much English based, apart from mother tongue. And of course, they also standardize mother tongue per se, like, they just have Chinese, Malay, and Tamil. But the thing is, people don't just speak these three languages, and by Chinese I mean Mandarin. So Chinese itself technically consists of many different Chinese languages per se. They have their own family called the Sinitic language family. So yeah, the thing is, the mother tongue that they consider in school is preferred over the other languages, either the dialects or other minority languages in terms of Singapore, like whatever's minority here. Of course, they could be actually important languages in their native land, and yeah, that's you get the idea. So because of that, people spoke these other languages, whether it be like other Chinese languages, other Malay related languages. By Malay, I mean like the archipelago, not the actual language. You know what I mean? Yeah, or other Indian languages as well. So yeah, that's the start point of shifting towards English and maybe Mandarin for the Chinese people at least. Yeah, but even then, English kind of is becoming more predominant nowadays. So yeah, that's because of globalization, which has just sped things really quickly. And we all have this special ability to speak both standardized English and our good old Singlish. Well, just don't expect me to speak the rest of this episode in Singlish because I don't think I can really do that. I'm not that pro at it. But yeah, okay, fine. That's not the issue. But anyway, sooner or later, in the future, it could be that most people will just be using English, not even using their mother tongue. And in other countries, we see that usually what happens is English or whatever lingua franca that we are looking at. And by the way, lingua franca does not mean French. It actually means, it used to refer to a mixture of European Romance languages and Caucasian languages that were used by many people. It was like a mix of all of them, and a lot of people could communicate using it. So that's what a lingua franca originally was. But today it's used to refer to like this predominant, like dominant language in a society that's used in the political system or in the institutionalized language in a sense. So yeah, in other countries you usually see that happening. Like people learn that language and many a times they use it for their business or for many other things. Of course, it doesn't happen everywhere. Like there are definitely countries in which they still predominantly speak their native language, and even if they're like supposed, like if you think that more developed countries will definitely have like their like English as their main language, think about it this way. Even in okay, if in a way, like European countries was they also still speak in their own European languages, and even in Asia we have Japan, Korea. They still speak in their own native languages. It's more of there's actually more to that. It's not just once you get more institutionalized and stuff, everyone starts speaking English. That's not really how it works. In fact, if now that I think of it, it's more common in places where there are many different languages present and not just one single language. Like for example, here we have four different or official languages, and English is like the thing that unites us all in terms of communicating with each other. And in India, for example, because in India a lot of people know how to speak English and they're taught how to speak it, it's because India itself has a lot of different languages within its country. And I suppose it's much easier for them to just communicate in English because everyone learns it there, or at least those who go to school. Those who go to school get to learn it, and in a way they're actually quite good at it. And yeah, that's why that kind of stuff happens. But maybe in Korea or in Japan, since there isn't that much language variance in those countries. Like in Korea is mostly just Korean except for the dialectal variances, and Japan also is mostly just Japanese. Apart from Ainu, I don't think there's not a lot of other languages going on around there. So yeah, as you can see, they tend to speak in their own native languages because one, it's still okay to do it. It still works. And two, they don't really need to communicate with foreigners all that much. Like mostly they're communicating within themselves, and they also know English as a side thing to help communicate with the foreigners. So yeah, that's the difference between whether a country is more likely to use English a lot or much lesser in a sense. That's probably one factor. But anyways, where was I? Other factors that we can look at is colonialism, which is actually pretty much where most of that English influence comes into play, because the British had a lot of colonial history right there, and even Americans have some kind of influence over some of the countries, even though they didn't really so-called colonialize them. They probably did a lot of stuff there in a bunch of different countries. If you're talking about the Cold War especially, yeah, you can go figure that out yourself. But you can tell that there's a lot of influence from these two major countries in terms of English per se. But there are other languages also that we can see this happening with. For example, in Africa, there are many countries that speak French as an official, that like the people know how to speak French. They do speak their native African languages, but they have French as one of the official languages there. And that is because of, French territory. Like, they used to be French colonies and stuff, so they now have adopted that as their lingua franca, kind of. And likewise, other places could have maybe Spanish or something, Portuguese. Yeah, I'm not really that aware, but the one that I'm most familiar with is the English and the French one. So yeah. Anyway, so that's the first one, colonialism. The second one is media influence. In the past, of course, even now, there's this influence from American media, and people try to speak like, in an American accent or something like that. But like nowadays, there's definitely influences from languages that are not English. Like, for example, K-pop. Like, a lot of people watch Korean dramas, K-pop and stuff, and that has spurred a bunch of people to go and learn it. But that doesn't mean they actually speak in it. It's just that they are interested in it. But I'm saying that this is also technically an example of media influence on the language habits or the language interests of various people. And if you're looking at maybe other ways that people could be tempted to learn certain languages or start speaking certain languages, you can talk about the education system. As I mentioned earlier, in Singapore, there's certain languages that are taught in the mother tongue syllabus, and even though afterwards they did introduce other languages that can be taught within the mother tongue syllabus, most of the people here study either Mandarin Chinese, Malay, or Tamil, and the other languages are actually other Indian languages. So in the end, you don't really have people learning maybe the so-called dialectal, and actually they're not really dialects, they're other Sinitic languages, but you get the idea. There isn't a lot of variance in terms of the mother tongues here as well. And if you're looking at another kind of example that you can use based on education, it is the learning of third languages. Of course, here we have MOE giving chances to people to learn, French, Spanish, German, Japanese, Arabic, and things like that. But if this is not the only place that people learn third languages, there are other countries in which people learn a lot of languages, especially in European countries that people know at least 2 or 3 languages minimum. They don't just know one, but they know more than one. Just because in Europe there's a lot of mixing between different countries, like definitely at the border areas there'll be other languages that are being spoken. But these languages are still more of the major languages, not really the minority kind of languages. So yeah, that's why they don't really need to speak. Like, some of them will definitely learn English as well. English is one of the languages that they teach there in Europe as well. But yeah, you get the idea. So there are some people in Europe who can probably speak like 5 different languages without having to learn it later in life. They learn it early when it's the best time to learn it. And even in India, they have this thing where you have to learn a third language, and it's kind of compulsory. I think to some extent it's somewhat compulsory, and usually people will learn they'll either learn Hindi or they'll learn one of the European languages like French or something. Yeah, so that's usually what they give in terms of education there. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so that's another factor that you can have. And now we'll look at another different factor, which is diglossia. So diglossia is what happens when the country, the people have strong competency in English as well as their own native language. And this happens in places like Philippines or even India, basically. Basically, people will start telling a sentence maybe in their native language, and then they'll start using words of English in it. So if you want to know more about that, you can actually watch a video. I had to put the link. Yeah, so that's diglossia. So in a way, yeah, we'll now go to the question of whether this whole influence of like language shift or influence of English is good or bad. And for that, we would have to define what is considered good or bad. Like, we never really told whether the fact that you're speaking a different language is going to be good or bad for, it could be good in one sense and bad in a different sense, in fact. So you had to actually clearly define that if you're going to talk about this kind of stuff to begin with. So for example, you can say it's bad that the number of languages being used overall is decreasing. So there's like lesser languages, and lesser language diversity, and English kind of gets the monopoly in that sense. And as I said, for example, here, even if people are speaking, like learning their mother tongues, they're mostly speaking English and they're in their houses or with their friends and even with their family sometimes. So yeah, that's, in a way, they're using less of their own languages and speaking more of English in a sense. But you could also say, oh, maybe it's a good thing that, English is being quite dominant, because now we can actually communicate with everyone around the world without the language barrier per se. We don't have the mistranslations and stuff like that. You just talk directly in English, and maybe everyone can understand everyone else better. So let me just give a brief explanation for both sides. So for the side of the number of languages decreasing, that part, which is a bad thing. Why is it bad? Well, first of all, people won't be able to communicate with the old folks anymore. Basically, the senior citizens, and of course, I have this like a generalization with stereotypical sounding, but generally, you would definitely have some senior citizens who do not know English, and when the young kids don't really know the native language, then they cannot really communicate with each other. And so what happens is these senior citizens can communicate with their grandkids or something, or maybe they're forced to learn how to communicate with the grandkids, which would probably hinder their quality of life, and that's not good. We have to, we need they have to have their well-being as well, if you think about it. So the next reason would be that understanding and knowing a language would also mean understanding the culture behind that language. So that's actually the reason given to learn new languages, because you can understand another culture, you can understand another point of view. So if you look at it the opposite way, if you lose the language, you mean you lose a culture, or at least a significant chunk of the culture. Of course, it's possible to still learn a culture without knowing the language, but the language really gives a lot of aspects to the culture. It gives you more ways to find out more about the culture. It gives you certain terms that only exist in that culture and doesn't exist in maybe English, for that matter. And losing the ability to speak a certain language, or not having the ability to begin with, means that you don't know that culture 100% anymore. You only know it maybe like 70% or even lesser than that. So yeah, that's actually quite important to some people, or it could not, or maybe not that important, but in a way it could be important in a sense, not just in terms of the meaningfulness or anything, but it could be useful for looking at certain issues in the real world, either scientific issues or political issues or any other issues, from different points of view. So actually knowing about the culture helps you understand what the people there are facing, or like how the people there think of a certain problem that they are facing, or you're facing, or whatever it is. You get the idea. You get better at solving problems. So the next thing is that languages also give different perspectives on life. So if you can already tell that different languages have different sentence structures, and that is a very clear way to see that different languages have different perspectives to begin with. If you do not know what I'm talking about, I mean the fact that some languages have the subject-object-verb versus others having subject-verb-object structure, and that already means two different ways of doing a sentence. So yeah, this is the simplest way of showing it, but there are definitely more complicated ways that languages give different perspectives on life. For example, maybe the different ways that they describe color. So losing one language means that you're now more narrow-minded, and probably even less creative because you have one less way of thinking through a certain problem, as I mentioned earlier. So yeah, in some places, this is the last one. So in some places there is a total language extinction, or maybe languages that are very very close to extinction, and these languages may disappear before we get the chance to even document them and understand a chunk of language history. And this is usually seen in for example, tribal languages, or it could even be stuff that is actually, stuff like the language isolates of today. For example, Ainu and Basque, they are actually language isolates today because we do not really have any clear defined connection between them and other languages nearby them. And maybe the reason why the language isolates today is because all of their other common ancestors, like the other languages that are actually related to them, have disappeared. Who knows? That's the reason why. And that means we kind of, won't ever know what happened, what the actual language was, unless we get enough documentation on that. But of course, before we get all panicky and everything, we should realize that, like, this is actually kind of like a GPSA for once. Okay, never mind. We should realize that at least in some cases, using English or another lingua franca as a primary language does not mean that they totally forget the other language or their native language for that matter. The more likely case is that either they use their mother tongue at home, although I guess in Singapore it's possible that's not actually happening, or in certain casual conversations, or maybe diglossia is employed. As I said, diglossia happens a lot in some places like India and the Philippines, and it happens even today. I think to keep happening forever, so, Or at the very least, the people will still have the ability to understand their language, even if they don't try to speak it or anything. So, for example, they can read the language and they can understand what other people say. Like, me. Okay, so right, so what about the good side? In terms of the good aspects of, like, I need to argue for both sides right now, so yeah. So in terms of the good aspects, which I will do with my, what's that thing? Okay, now I don't remember. Okay, like the double speech. Okay, now I don't remember that. Yeah, this is why it's not a good idea to only know one language. If there's otherwise I'll just be like zoning out. Okay, now I'm zoning out. Okay, so in terms of the good aspects of knowing, shifting towards English or something, one reason it could be that English helps you communicate with a lot of people from different countries. So, you can still learn about other cultures. Although you may not learn 100%, maybe you learn 50% of it. I don't know. In a way, it is weirdly contradictory to what it's not contradictory, but it is like the same thing, talking about the same thing, but in a different way. So you can actually learn about other people's cultures, although not everything. You can learn about some of the things by talking to them and knowing about it. Although you may not fully understand it. To have full understanding of it, you probably need to learn their language to understand it. But if by communicating with them, you may probably get to learn some of the things that happen in their culture. So the next one is that English helps us share stuff. So, for example, in YouTube, you might probably see like videos in different languages, and sometimes you don't understand what they're saying, but you have your CC there and you can happily watch the video because now you can actually understand what they're talking about because the CC is in English. By CC, I mean closed caption. So yeah, if you never used it, then I have no idea what you're doing. Anyways, and of course you have like the business language or language used for professionals, as well as scientific language. So in terms of the scientific world, we definitely have English being quite prominent, as well as French and other commonly used European languages. They're quite prominent in the scientific world. And you could argue that rather than being a pure monopolizer, English serves as a bridge between people with different mother tongues. So the idea of this particular argument is that English doesn't just replace all the languages, but more of helps to bridge the connection between people who know different languages and want to talk with each other, that kind of thing. So instead of actually just making them forget their mother tongue, it just gives them an extra language to learn, and then they can now talk with each other without any issue, or communicate with each other if not really directly talking for that matter. So in terms of translation, subtitles, and basically communication without misunderstandings. So that's the first issue, and it's already 25 minutes. Oh my gosh. Okay, never mind. But actually, that was the main one. The rest of them aren't going to take as much time. So the second issue is about youth speak and slang. By youth speak, I mean, well, yeah, every generation that comes will have their own slang coming along with them. So I can't really specifically say, oh, this generation's slang, because there'll always be a new one coming up. It'll be like a never ending bunch of slang. You know what I mean? Yeah, so the first thing would be, the first point is that this is actually a source of contention between generations indeed. Yeah, I literally wrote that in my script. How fun. Okay, so what are the factors leading to youth speak? So first factor would be the trends, maybe the influence from media. So trends are a bit different. Trends could be like the stuff that you, like someone does in TikTok, this one particular video or something, and then everyone else starts following that same video. Yeah, that's a trend. Or, I mean, it doesn't have to be in TikTok. It can be like something that they do in social media or anywhere for that matter. And influence from the media, it should be like of course nowadays I think media would probably refer to more of YouTube rather than TV. I'm not sure how many people actually watch TV nowadays. I mean, like, watch TV enough to actually be influenced by it. Anyways, so the next one is school and interaction with other youths, because young people like to be creative and they like to communicate with their fellow young people in a way that adults will not understand, for that matter. Actually, I don't think, not everyone really wants to do that, but there are some people who want to do that. So yeah, that leads to certain terms that become slang eventually. And also, school is a good place to start a trend because there's a lot of other similar age people there, and it's easier for people of a similar age to understand what you're doing. So yeah, great, school. So third one is technology, which I think we will discuss that in greater detail later on. And technology would be stuff like SMS, WhatsApp, your emojis, especially emojis, which allow for different terms or shorthand terms that people can message their friends. Now I'll talk more about that later on. So, and the last one is that it just happens. As I mentioned, it has it's been happening for ages and centuries, and to keep happening, there'll always be some new slang or some new evolution in the language. People always want to say new things, like they want to invent new words to say, or bring back old ones and then make it new or something. I don't know. So is it a problem? Well, before you even ask that question, as I just mentioned, we know it's unavoidable. It has been happening for centuries, and it actually drives the evolution of a language as well. It's not like something that you can suddenly stop, or something that you can test to see whether it affects the language in some way or the other if you didn't have slang, because you cannot do that. It won't happen in a sense. So you can't say that this should be forbidden or something. Of course, you can see that there's also some roadblocks, especially the generational gap. Yeah, but actually it's just that there isn't any other real problem to having slang per se. It's just that the older generations don't understand what the younger generations are saying, and then they say, oh no, our language is getting ruined. But in the end, this process will just repeat 20 years later, with this younger generation now becoming the older generation and then complaining about the next younger generation. So yeah, that's pretty much what's going to happen, pretty much. So in fact, nowadays it's probably even less of a problem, because everyone now can access the same words through the internet. Go and learn from there's one web page where you can actually learn the slang words and stuff like that. And you can learn that in seconds without any issues whatsoever. You don't even have to embarrass yourself by asking another younger person, what does this term mean? What does this abbreviation mean? You can just search it in Google and you'll get the answer in seconds. So yeah, it's actually not a problem, I think. In my opinion, it's not a problem. Like, it's only superficially a problem. It's just a thing that, people complain about, but in reality it's not a problem. It's more of just something that maybe our traditional documentation means cannot really catch up with. For example, dictionaries, if they introduce a new word, it'll take a while for them to actually do that because they need a bunch of people to agree that this word is a word or something like that. So yeah, it's more of institutional problems rather than actual problems with the language itself. Okay, so now let's look at some examples of slang. So the first one I can probably tell you is verlan, which is French slang. And what's the meaning of this particular thing? It comes from this word called lingua, and that word probably means back to front or something like that. So it's basically like if you reverse the pronunciation of that word, you'll get verlan. So like, lingua has two syllables and then you just say the syllables the other way around. That's basically the name of this slang. If you don't understand what I'm saying, I apologize. I apologize for my, either my pronunciation or my lack of being able to explain this, but you get the idea. Yeah, so this particular slang actually just gets some words and then, reverses their pronunciations the other way around and calls that a word. And that's the new word that they use for that particular word. Of course, these words aren't in the dictionary or something. They're mostly used in texting and stuff like that. But, there's a slang basically. And some of these words have been even more modified by, doing the same process of sound swapping on them again. And you might be wondering that this brings them back to the original word, but no, sometimes there are some syllables that get cut off. So now the word is a different word again. And that is like a new slang word already. So yeah, that's French slang for you. If you want to know more about it, you can watch the video that, I put the link for. Okay, so I don't know why I put TikTok underneath that. I guess maybe I thought TikTok was a place where you can create slang. I don't know. I'm not really sure. Unfortunately, unlike most young people, I'm not that updated with slang. But you know what I mean. I already gave you enough explanation on why it happens and what's the consequence of it. So I don't really have much to say. I'm pretty sure you will. Oh, come on. Why is there all this noise outside? It's always noisy outside. Okay, anyways, you probably will know these examples better than I do. So if I do find more, I will just put it there. If not, you just find it yourself. You probably know it better. You can probably even use stuff from Singlish or something. I'm not sure if there's anything that's particularly new per se, because I'm not sure what terms are considered new in Singlish and which ones are older. Yeah, okay, anyways, let's move on. Let's go to... Okay, before I go to the last so-called issue, which is actually about technology, let me give a little aside about sign language. Well, I could dedicate a whole episode just to this. If you're interested, I am totally up for it. Because really there's a lot more to sign language than just sociolinguistics. And I can't do justice in this short shout out. I kind of hate writing script because I can never read the script properly. But okay, let me just quickly say something here. A deaf community expresses their solidarity through their culture, which includes sign language. And even if there are some similarities between sign languages in different countries, there are definitely, like, all these languages are definitely different languages for sure. And another thing that you should know is that these languages are as much a language as any spoken one. They aren't just some, symbolic signs or something, but they are signs that can express very abstract things like love and feelings and stuff like that, or very complicated things as well. So the actual languages, and they have their own grammar and stuff like that. Although the way that the grammar works is a bit different from the way it will work in a spoken language. And there are also the variations in the sign language could be due to cultural variations. Like for example, there's a like the the alphabet, right? They usually use like an English kind of alphabet, and in ASL the T has a different hand shape, like different sign compared to SGSL's T, and that's because the ASL T. Sorry, I'm not sure if it's ASL the American Sign Language. Their letter T is actually offensive to Asian people, so yeah, in other sign languages, usually the T is a bit different, or at least those who find the American one offensive, they just change the T, and you get the idea. Okay. Another thing maybe that I can point out is, for example, in Singapore we have special signs for Marina Bay Sands and stuff like that, and the different parts of Singapore like Jurong, Woodlands, a bunch of other places. Yeah, okay, cool. But you get the idea. Different cultures influence the progression of the sign language and the creation of the sign language as well. So yeah, that's my quick short shout out. So the last issue that we're gonna look at is I was about to talk about computational linguistics, but wait, I can actually talk about it because we can look at linguistics and technology. So how does technology influence sociolinguistics? We kind of covered some of this stuff already, but I'll just explain it in greater detail. So in the old days, we had these. Okay, maybe I don't know. I never used one of these, so I shouldn't say we. But people older than me had things called pagers. So pagers were like these little things that you can, tap on and send little short messages to people. But the thing about these pagers is that they didn't really have a lot of space to write stuff. So you had to really, really condense your message into the pager. And because of that, there are certain terms that were derived from what people wrote on pages to express stuff like, maybe they love someone or something like that. Like those really short terms became a part of language in a way, or maybe influenced language in certain ways. But anyways, I'm not that familiar with pages because I've never seen one or I never used one apart from in videos maybe. Like I only see them being shown in a video, that kind of thing. But anyway, so now we have something that's more relatable, which is social media as well as SMS, WhatsApp. So those like short messages that you can type on your phone, like texting. Nowadays people want to send information quickly. They want to just make things go quickly, so they actually type quickly and they type shorter things, like the words become shortened, and there's like contractions and abbreviations that are going through pretty much everywhere. And of course in Singapore we love our abbreviations more than more than a lot of other things. So we like abbreviations a lot, and I guess we are very familiar with that. Okay, anyways, and apart from abbreviations and contractions and stuff like that, there's also emojis, and there are some people who literally send messages that only contain emojis. I don't know how that's possible. Okay, yeah, it's like I wrote emojis or emojis to the extent of Emoji Movie. I don't know why that's a thing. I don't know why that thing is a thing. Okay, anyways, and of course, like, because texting, like, the first language used in it is mostly English, we popularized communicating in English itself. Although nowadays there's a promotion of a bigger variety of languages, there are more languages that you can type in your text, and there's also more languages that you can use in Google Translate. But honestly, is this enough? Looking at translation fails, there's actually a channel called Translation Fails, and what they do is they just translate stuff through many languages and it becomes gibberish. So yeah, that's fun. Please go watch it. Anyways, the point is, Google Translate is a bit translating, but it still does the job of translating, so it's better than nothing. Hopefully it'll become better in the future. And of course, we have more subtitles, like your YouTube closed captions. You can have community captioning, like different people who are interested in captioning, they can just do it themselves. And instead of the creator having to provide the subtitles themselves, especially if they don't really know the language. And of course, in media as well. And in media, it's not just about other languages that would be spoken, but also about sign language, because sometimes depending on the country, they have like in important events, they usually have a sign language interpreter. So, you know, basically we see the promotion of many languages and not just one. Yeah, so what about new technology like Google Duplex? I'm not sure why I call this new because it came like, I don't know, 2 years at least ago. But anyways, when is the Singlish version coming out? There was a link about that. Okay, cool. But apparently it wasn't good enough to be a Singlish version. It was just a sad attempt at understanding Singlish. But anyways, or more of just understanding the accent, not even Singlish per se. But yeah, okay, fine. Right, I honestly don't have anything else to say now, so let's end this right here, and you know the drill. I don't want to waste my time telling it again because I think you guys probably got tired of it. Anyways, yeah, it reminds me that I probably need to do a video in the future on the usage of the word like. Yeah, I actually wanted to do that. I haven't done it yet, so it'll come soon. Okay, cool. Thanks everyone. I hope you found this video useful. And as usual, stay safe and study well. Yeah, that's about it. Thanks and bye.